It's common knowledge that the Mafia was mainly composed of Italian men. After all, the Mafia did originate in Italy and then made their way over to the United States. But what most people don't realize is that there were women involved in the Mafia as well. Not only were they involved, but some of them were just as powerful as the men. So today we take a look at the women of the Mafia and see how they rose to power. Let's start with Lucia, whose last name has been hidden for her safety. Lucia lived in the Bronx during the 1960s and 70s, a time and place where the Mafia had a very strong presence. One night, while Lucia was working as a waitress at a local restaurant, she met a man named Carmine Galante. Now, Carmine was a high-ranking member of the Columbia crime family, and he was so enamored by Lucia that he began taking her on expensive dates, driving her around in luxury cars, and whisking her away to exclusive restaurants. However, soon after they started dating, Carmine was gunned down in an Italian restaurant, which left Lucia devastated. But when she went to his funeral, she was shocked to see that he had been laid to rest next to another woman. The woman introduced herself to Lucia as Carmine's widow and told her that she would be taking over Carmine's position in the crime family. And even though Lucia was obviously upset about losing her lover, she couldn't help but admire this strong woman who wasn't afraid to take charge. So she decided to become an informant for the FBI and took down several members of the Genovese crime family, including the woman who had stolen Carmine's heart and his spot in the Mafia. Next is Helen Viola, who was known as the godmother of the Mafia. Helen got involved with the Mafia when she married Joseph Barbera in 1935. Now, Joe had recently become the boss of the Lucchese crime family, and Helen was about to become the most powerful woman in organized crime. Soon after marrying Joe, Helen became known as the boss's wife and had a lot of influence over him. In fact, it was Helen who convinced Joe to move over to the United States and become a naturalized citizen, which eventually led him to becoming the boss of one of America's most powerful crime families. But as the years went on, Joe's health began to deteriorate, and Helen began making moves to secure her own power within the family. She took control of Joe's illegal gambling and loan sharking operations, and even had a hand in several murders. When Joe passed away in 1981, Helen assumed the role of boss, making her the first woman to ever lead a Mafia family. Although she officially retired from the Mafia in 1986 after being arrested for tax evasion. She remained the unofficial boss until her passing in 2008. Another influential woman in the Mafia was Frances McAlpine. She earned this nickname because she acted like a mother to mobster Al Capone's many illegitimate children and took care of them as if they were her own. But Frances's involvement with the Mafia didn't stop there. She was actually the wife of mobster Michael Lapido, and together they were one of the most notorious couples in the Mafia, in fact. Michael and Frances were so brazen that they hosted lavish parties at their mansion where they would invite some of the biggest mobsters in the country and plot their next big moves. The mansion even featured a secret room where mobsters could hide from the police, and it was rumored that Al Capone himself designed the room. But even though they seemed untouchable, the FBI eventually caught up to them, and Michael was sentenced to 50 years in prison. This didn't stop Frances from living her lavish lifestyle, though. She simply married one of Michael's associates named Frank Castellano and continued to throw crazy parties. In fact, the party lifestyle continued until she was a cool 75 years old. But no woman in the Mafia had more power than Santina De Matteo. Her father, Bernardo, was the boss of the Bonanno crime family, and he gave Santina a taste of power at a young age by making her his underboss. That's right. Santina was the first woman to ever hold a high-ranking position in the Mafia. But this caused a lot of tension within the organization, as many of the capo regime, or heads of the families, didn't agree with having a woman in such a powerful position. They argued that women belonged in the home and not in the Mafia. But Santina proved them wrong by showing that she was just as ruthless as any man. She negotiated business deals, settled disputes, and even ordered hits on anyone who crossed her. In fact, it was Santina who ordered the hit on Joseph Messino, who was the boss of the Bonanno crime family before her father. She had Messino killed because he had become an informant for the government and was cooperating in order to reduce his prison sentence. But despite her ruthlessness, Santina was also known for being generous, especially when it came to helping out the families of other mobsters. She paid for the education of many mobster children and helped to secure jobs for those who needed work. Because of this, she was respected by many, even though she was feared by most. Santina remained in her position until her father retired in 1989, at which point she became the official boss of the Bonanno crime family, making her the first and only woman to ever lead a mafia crime family. Another powerful mafia woman was Stephanie St. Clair, who used her beauty and charm to get close to some of the most powerful men in organized crime. In the 1960s, Stephanie worked as a topless dancer at the Copacabana nightclub in New York City, where she caught the attention of mobster Frank Thierry. The two began dating, and soon Stephanie became one of the most powerful women in the mafia. She was present at many important meetings, and was even said to have helped broker the peace treaty between rival mob families. But Stephanie's involvement in the mafia didn't just stop there. She was also said to be involved in money laundering and other illegal activities. However, in 1969, Stephanie's luck ran out when she was arrested on drug charges. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but only served 3 before being released. The next woman on our list is Maria Barata, who is the mistress of mobster Lucky Luciano. Maria was a major player in the mafia and was known for her intelligence and ability to keep secrets. In fact, she was present at the infamous meeting in Appalachian, New York, where the 5 families of the mafia met to discuss their illegal activities. But despite her involvement, Maria was never arrested and was able to live a relatively normal life after Luciano was imprisoned. However, she continued to be involved in the mafia and was said to be a close confidant of many powerful mobsters. Lastly, we have Josephine Barbera, who was the wife of mafia boss Joe Barbera. As we mentioned earlier, Joe was a member of the Lucchese crime family, and Josephine had a major influence on his decisions. In fact, it was Josephine who convinced Joe to move to the United States and become a naturalized citizen. This move allowed him to become the boss of one of America's most powerful crime families. But despite her influence, Josephine was never arrested and was able to live a relatively low-profile life. Now, I know what you're thinking. Where are the men in all this? Don't worry, we haven't forgotten about them. In fact, we've already mentioned quite a few of the most powerful men in the mafia, such as Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, and Joe Barbera. We just wanted to shed some light on the women who were just as powerful, if not more powerful than the men. So I ask you, who was the most powerful mafia woman in your opinion? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content. Till next time, stay safe and make sure you don't get whacked.